Erik Stover. He's a guy you might remember was managing director for the New York Red Bulls. He worked with the New Jersey Exposition Authority, New Jersey Sports and Exposition Authority. If you don't know what that was the Meadowlands. So he was operations director there. Did some work at Qualcomm Stadium in San Diego. And he's had a position with the Cosmos for many years. He's the COO, and he is presently involved in a new venture, which is called Match IQ Americas. And he is the president of that organization. Lots to talk about with Erik Stover, wide range of experiences and stories, I hope. But
Yeah,
Erik, welcome to the program, man. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
I think anybody I have on that has anything to do with the sport, I've got to ask you. So as you watch these, if you were in charge, would you pipe in fan sound or would you leave the natural effects? Because the NWSL has this drone fan sound, which I find annoying. And the MLS is using natural effects, with the exception of FS1. They decided they want to throw in the big crowd. What do you like?
Yeah, and some of my clients in Germany in the Bundesliga, they started without it, and then they brought it in, and it seemed like on social media everybody was raving about it, and then there was another wave going the other direction about people hating it. I kind of like it. I don't like it when they're trying to totally create an artificial home field advantage, if you will, like the booing and hissing and stuff at calls. I think having a bit of a hum in the background is a little better than nothing at all. That's my personal opinion, and I think I've seen some games where it has helped sort of subconsciously pull you back into how great sport was before all of this. And I don't love just the no noise at all, and you hear the players yelling. It feels like a training match. So put me in the category of preferring to have crowd noise piped in.
All right. Well, we've got a difference of opinion there. Hopefully we can connect on some opinions along the way here.
I don't think it's going to be the last one. You're wearing a Rutgers shirt, for God's sakes.
That's
I'm
right,
a Penn
baby.
State guy.
I know you're a Penn State guy. Well, the last time I coached a game against Penn State, 2-1 in overtime in the NCAA tournament. So that's what I remember.
Okay.
But sorry. Erik Stover, our guest. Let's retrace the steps a little bit. So when you got out of Penn State, you moved on. You came to Jersey. Where were you? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, Williamsport, Pennsylvania, dead center of the state, home of Little League baseball. A lot of people know it from that.
So did you cruise out? Did you cruise out and watch those games all the time when it came into your town?
Yeah, when I was a kid, sure, 10, 11, 12, I was there all the time, and it was such a special event and so important for the community. And the state really goes crazy when a local team makes it, and that's happened a few times. And so that it was always fun to be a part of and see where it is now. They had, extra stadiums and more facilities and ESPN.
A national television contract.
Yes, exactly. And even like the regionals are on national television. You worry that maybe it's becoming a little too professional, but definitely very important for the community. And I'm proud of that and where I grew up.
So you come to Jersey, and we knew it as the Meadowlands, which is where Giant Stadium and the Meadowlands Arena were, and there's a racetrack there. And so you got to see a lot of different things and operate in different ways. So tell us about that experience and how maybe it drew you to soccer.
So I was so lucky. I happened to be right place, right time. I think a lot of people who get into the sports industry where their mother or father doesn't own the team tell a similar story of being in the right place at the right time. So I started as a non-paid intern and worked my way up. And the Meadowlands at the time was the most premium sports complex in the world. Jets, Giants, Metro Stars, Nets, Devils. The racetrack was still profitable in the mid-90s. Kickoff Classic, Jimmy V Classic, East Regional. We did everything. And
you also did the were you there for the Meadowlands Grand Prix when they broke down No, you weren't there for
Yeah.
that? Oh,
So
okay.
I heard all the stories, but um, they had just stopped the Grand Prix
Oh.
the year prior to me coming to work there. And I
I want you to
also
know
heard,
I did the radio play by play of that thing, which was pretty challenging.
yeah, I
But
might imagine.
I got I got a ride around the track with Emerson Fittipaldi. So that's one of the
Yeah,
highlights of my life was, and
yeah,
he enjoyed scaring everybody that hopped
sure.
in. You know, it was like a,
Yeah,
it
and
was interesting.
Andretti used to do that too. So I used to hear the stories of Andretti taking people around the track.
Yeah. So, how many? Well, tell me this: how many Springsteen concerts did you see?
Yeah, so I think it was in 2003. I did 10 Springsteen shows at Giant Stadium. We did 16 concerts that summer, which I think is still a record. Um, and Bruce was there all the time. When I was in college athletics, he did, I think, 15 shows at the arena.
Yeah.
Always, yeah, it was such a great place because every day it was something new and exciting to be a part of.
And I told you before we started the recording, your boss there was my boss at Rutgers when I got there to coach the women's soccer program, Bob Mulcahy,
Yeah,
and it was quite a place. It's changed dramatically,
yeah,
but it was it was the place to be. So Erik Stover is our guest. So move on to the Red Bulls, who were the Metro Stars and played at Giant Stadium for a while. So you go to the Red Bulls and you understand that there's this new ownership, Red Bull. They have this aspiration to build a stadium, bring in players. I'd like you to let's focus on the stadium first because as you know, I do games for New York City FC, and the big chat is always about, well, when are they going to get a soccer specific stadium, and what is the difficulty? Now I know that was in New Jersey, but it's in Harrison, Hudson County. It's not like there's a lot of room there. Tell us a little bit about the difficulties of actually just finalizing and getting the agreement and putting the shovel in the first time in an area
right.
in the metropolitan area.
Yeah, well, I think nationally, at least the old statistic was from ideation to ribbon cutting in the United States, it takes on average 10 years. Um, that's far too slow, I think. I wasn't part of the final deal to put Red Bull Arena in Harrison. When I came back from San Diego to be sort of like a COO, oversee the stadium construction training facility. When Marc Grand Prix was there the first time, the foundation of the stadium was already starting. But I moved up rather quickly. Mark left. Eventually, I was promoted into his position, and the politics of this region really became a huge part of my life. Nuisance lawsuits, planning board meetings, more lawsuits, more delays, permitting processes, tax issues. It is just so challenging. And this was in a community where a third of the property that is now being redeveloped and has been for the last 10 years, a third, that was a third of the city. And the city was desperate for redevelopment, desperate for investment, and we still had county and state politics and as I said, nuisance lawsuits. So it is so very challenging. And then when you move it across the river into Manhattan or Brooklyn or Queens or wherever, uh, it's times 10 probably.
Well, you've experienced a bit of that with the Cosmos, right? I mean,
Yeah.
my feeling about the Cosmos is uh, once they reemerged onto the scene, is that were forever looking for, what you might call a proper facility, your own
Yeah.
place. So you've dealt with that a bit.
Yeah. I guess I tried to forget that. um, look, we had a very aggressive plan. It was if it was a poker game, it was going all in on the first hand. Um, and I think it was a one of a kind proposal. It was in response to an RFP, so the pathway in theory was cleared and should not have had politics and all the nuisance that we dealt with around it. Um, and it was visionary in that there was no taxpayer money meant to come come from any part of the community, any part of the state. It would have been a full-on mixed-use redevelopment.
And that's a big part of any deal these days, because communities are always promised these grandiose, this many people will be hired, this will,
Yep.
impact the community in a positive way from a revenue standpoint. But the story so often, no matter what the sport is, that's not really true.
No, it's not. And so the mixed use development is important. That makes the redevelopment a job creator 365 days out of the year. So in our plan, we had a very good partner, a very exceptional, established mixed use development partner focused on a lot of work in Queens and Manhattan. So we felt really good about it. We thought it was absolutely going to create a lot of jobs. It would inject life into the racetrack and the region around it. So it
So
was very
you're
frustrating.
talking about Belmont then?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so now the Islanders are moving along with their arena. There is no mixed use development as far as I know. So that's unfortunate. Good thing about an arena is you get a lot more dates out of it. You're going to
Right.
do 100, 150 dates compared to maybe 40 at a soccer stadium. So yeah, there's no doubt that the delays around that project, the interference of lobbying groups against us really hurt the club. That every day that went by, we would hear the same thing from sponsors, from season ticket holders. What's going on with the stadium? Well, when you get the stadium going, then I'll buy season tickets, or
Right.
I'll follow through on the sponsorship, or I'll pay more for the sponsorship. All that was very, very real. And to have the political interference, the lobbying groups interfering with that, no doubt over a 4-year period put us in some trouble for sure.
What was the biggest? Who provided the biggest blockade there? I mean, what were the?
Yeah, look, I've had politicians tell me directly who some of the folks were. Um, I don't really want to get into that now. Plus,
Sure.
there's the antitrust lawsuits going on. But yeah, what we were trying to do would have been absolutely essential for the NASL, essential for lower division soccer, essential for infrastructure growth for the sport in the New York metropolitan area, and to offer it in a way that was no cost to the taxpayer, basically converting a parking lot into a stadium. It seemed like a no-brainer, and nobody, to my knowledge, still has offered that level of a proposal. Nearly $500 million of private investment, no taxpayer money. I still haven't seen that. And so it was very frustrating, and undoubtedly that interference impacted our ability to succeed.
Well, you certainly had a lot of success with the Cosmos. Look at the NASL championship in 2013, 15, 16. That's all during your tenure. And there's a guy that's also common to those titles, Gio Savarese.
I didn't know Gio that well. So he had left Red Bull not long before I got there,
Okay.
and so I think it was a pretty contentious separation. But I was on the job about a year, and Gio was, as a friend, representing Jorge Ramos. You may remember the player,
Sure.
for Red Bull, the Venezuelan defensive midfielder. He came in as a friend, and that was the first time that I had met Gio. And then not too long after that, the whole probably a year or two later, the whole Cosmos thing happened, and he was already the academy director for the Cosmos, and Seamus O'Brien had eyed Gio to take over as head coach. And to be honest, and Gio knows this, I was a little leery because the Cosmos were such a huge name, and we had to win, and we had to win from day one. I was a little leery of a coach without head coaching experience, but he really crushed it. I mean, he lived the cosmopolitan ethos that we wanted to be. I think we had a great partnership. We got along very well. I think there was a good balance to my experience and his experience, and really helping define the Cosmos, because we both had that MLS experience of what wasn't great about MLS and the league rules and how it functioned. We tried to bring something different, to be really transparent, to build a team in a way that you can't, or at least couldn't at the time in MLS. And I think it led to a lot of success. And I'm glad to see him doing well.
Well, tell us about the qualities of Gio. He's someone I met, I think, while he was with the Red Bulls. He's an LIU Brooklyn graduate. I started the
Mm-hmm.
program there on the women's side, and my first meeting with him was him coming in on my request to just speak to the girls. It was a very rough season, and I just remember his presentation so well, and it just was so meaningful. What it was meaningful to me is that LIU Brooklyn meant so much to him. So, based on how you're describing him with the Cosmos and the ethos, it seems to be very similar. But what are those special
Yeah.
qualities? Why is he having success? Why did he
Well,
have success there and now in Portland?
he's so passionate. Um, he loves the game to his core. It's given him so much, and so I think there's nothing fake about his love for the game and wanting to be on the field every day. Um, I think he's a high character person, a great husband, a great father, and I think those characteristics carry over to how he treats the people in the locker room. I'd say his greatest strength during our time together was how he managed the folks, to manage the people, the staff, the players. Um, it wasn't always easy. We were pretty good at having an idea of the type of person we wanted in the locker room, but it was also volatile, so it wasn't always easy. And he did a great job of managing the people and the expectations. And also, I think the last thing I should mention is his competitiveness. So it was 100% wrong about being worried about a novice coach in winning the games we needed to win, because nobody wanted to win more than him. So he lived that every day, and it was competitive in training. It was competitive in the games. There were games. I remember a game in Tampa where he changed the formation, and he did it solely on purpose. It was hot. It was humid. We weren't playing well, and he put him in a brutal formation to send a lesson that you have to show up and you have to compete. And if you don't, I'm going to be thoroughly disappointed, and you're going to pay for it. And we ended up losing and kind of embarrassing ourselves. But I think, really changed the attitude of the players for the rest of the year, that every game matters, and our fans expect it to be a championship level effort. And so he brings that every day.
Yep. Sometimes you have to sacrifice in order to get the message across.
Yeah.
And I think if they didn't see it with the Cosmos, now that MLS is so frequently televised, we see it on the sideline with Gio, how passionate and competitive he truly is. Erik Stover, our guest, formerly with the Red Bulls, currently with the Cosmos as the COO. He's been in that position since 2012, also the president of Match IQ Americas. I think one of the more interesting parts of your story, Erik, is you're given a lot of credit for bringing Thierry Henry into the league. He's now the head coach of the Montreal Impact. Would that have ever happened if he hadn't come over and played in MLS? I don't know. I don't think so, but it could. But tell us the story about how Thierry Henry became a star in MLS.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. So, I as I mentioned, I came back from San Diego to help with the stadium. Really, that was my primary job: stadium training facility, game day operations. Um, and Mark had left to start a new position. We were sort of without a leader for a couple months. I was promoted into the position, and within a couple days of getting that position, um, Darren Dean reached out to me, agent for Thierry Henry and many other great players across the world, and said that he wanted to talk about Thierry coming to MLS. and was going to be in New York. And within a few days, I was at the Four Seasons talking to Darren Dean about Thierry Henry, and I was really hired to help manage a stadium. So it was a unique environment situation for me. I was kind of like, I can't believe I'm sitting here right now with all this responsibility. Um, I think the biggest thing was Thierry wanted to come to New York. That was obviously the impetus there. It was important for him in his career and his life. He wanted to do it. But we had some open discussions too. I sat down with Thierry and said, look, you're going to play in baseball stadiums. At the time, San Jose was in a minor league baseball stadium. I think Kansas City was too. You're going to have awful locker rooms. You're going to have bad pitches. You're going to have to play on turf,
Right.
which he obviously didn't like to do. But we had those conversations, and he was committed to it. It took a long time to get the deal done because it's at that time, if you remember, it's 2008. That was the best Barcelona team maybe ever, maybe the best team ever. So at the end of the 8-9 year, I called Darren. I'm like, well, he's obviously not leaving now. Um, and then so he stuck around another year. He got injured halfway through the year and kind of lost his position to Pedro. Then we had the World Cup and the handball incident. So a lot happened in that 2 years of trying to get the deal done. But I think he was so essential to the transformation of the organization as a whole. We had a new stadium coming in. We needed a star player. Thierry is very charismatic. It can be difficult at times, as people know, but speaks French, speaks English, speaks Italian and Spanish all fluently. And I think all of those skills were important to him being an ambassador for the club.
Erik, the bringing in the stars like a Thierry Henry has become less the priority in a lot of cases, and the development of American youth, or bringing in younger players, young designated players in particular from South America. But if we focus on the development of the American player, we know Red Bulls have. And Gio Savarese could well have been the impetus to start that when he was the director there before leaving for the Cosmos. But you've been in two situations, the Red Bulls and the Cosmos, where what happens on the youth level is vital. And you've seen Red Bulls and Red Bulls too. They've cranked out players. Tyler Adams comes to mind for certain. So where do you think all that lies right now on this whole development landscape? There's so much going on.
Yeah, well, it's a mess, absolute mess across the country. Um, at the Cosmos, we had to suspend operations of our academy. Over the last 3-4 years, we spent nearly $2 million with almost nothing to show for it. We had a lot of our players during that time poached and went to Red Bull and NYCFC. We had a lot of dubious decisions out of U.S. soccer with how we were trying to grow our academy, and those things impacted our ability to keep players in the system. And after 4 years, we should have been talking to players that could make the transition to the professional team, and that wasn't happening. And then when you add in the fact that the development academy was going away and there's still a lot of uncertainty in what it's going to look like moving forward, I'd say it's still really much a disaster. The talent is here in the United States. There's no question. All the clients I work with Match IQ in Europe recognize it. They're here and they're looking for players. And the players they find and they could get over to Europe faster are the ones that are proving that they can make it on a global scale. So how we develop players has been a problem for a very long time. Again, when I was promoted up into the managing director position at Red Bull, I asked Jeff Agus, who was the sporting director at the time, what's our biggest problem? And not Red Bull, but soccer. And he said, development of players from ages 14, 15 to 18 were terrible. We just don't do it right. We don't do it well. And our guys can compete until 14, and then they fall off with the rest of the world.
Right.
And I think that goes directly to the pyramid that we have in the United States and how it's structured, the lack of training compensation, solidarity payments, transfer fees. Those things don't exist. We don't have a proper pyramid, and our players, for lack of a better term, die on the vine in a large majority. And that's really unfortunate. I think there are clubs like Red Bull that do it really well. And so you have a Matt Miazga, you have a Tyler Adams, you have guys like that that have come up through the system and you can look to and say, this is working. And I think it works for Red Bull because Red Bull is a global football brand and they have committed the resources since they took over to do it the right way. And it started with guys like Gio, Dave Jervis with the training programs, and they identified through a training program that Tyler Adams at like 11 years old, and eventually got him into the academy. So that's the way it should run, and you have teams that are doing it well. But across the country, we don't do it well in MLS. And then I don't think the lower division teams are focused on youth development enough because it costs, like I said, $2 million for us to run it, and we don't get anything out of it.
So, Erik, you talked about solidarity payments, transfer fees, and one of your clients with Match IQ, Schalke, many others. That's the way they do business. So, how can that transform the landscape in the U.S.? So, does the MLS, and I don't hear about it often, but a USL championship team, a Cosmos, has a player worthy? Because you used the word poach earlier. So how do we replace that with you get a fee and that helps you sustain your franchise?
Well, that's the way it should be. That's what training compensation is. That's what solidarity payments are. The driver globally is the first division in whatever country. So Portugal, I think a couple years ago, led the world in transfer fees. So they had the largest surplus of revenue from revenues, money spent on bringing players in. Here in the United States, we don't have any of that really. And I've said this publicly before, and people always come in and say, "What about this? What about that?" Obviously, there are a couple of examples of transfer fees paid, but for the most part, it doesn't make sense for an owner of a lower division team to invest in an academy. Certainly not a pay-to-play academy, like to provide full cost to the kids and have it not cost them or their parents anything. That doesn't pay because the process of signing a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid, having him play on, let's say, a USL team for a year, and then selling him up to MLS, there is no money at the moment to recover your investment. The rest of the world, there is. And that's the way it functions. And I think the big clubs realize that if they don't do that, if they don't have that system, then they're not going to be casting a wide enough net. And so that matters to the clubs. It also matters to the federation. So what was it, 10, 15 years ago, probably a little longer now, where Germany wasn't developing players well enough, and the federation looked across and said, we're not doing this right, and we need to make some changes. And they devised structural changes, and everybody had to buy in on it. And I think you look at where the Bundesliga is now, and they develop a lot of players. I mean, if we just went through the list at Schalke, we'd come up with 10, 12 names that are world-class players. That's one club. We don't do that. So what we get is the handful of players that can get out to Europe sooner, 16, because they have a passport or some other loophole they can get through. And those players are our best players. This is not a criticism of the sport of soccer in the United States. It is the case for all sports. The best of the best have to compete and be put in a pressure cooker to become great. And if they're not going to become great. So we just don't have that system. and it's hard to tell organizations that they shouldn't be charging players or parents, and that organizations should be investing in kids when they don't expect to get the money in return. I do think there's solutions for that. I think there's partnerships that could be developed. That's one of the things we're working on at Match IQ, is to help move the growth of the sport in this country along through some of these strategic partnerships. I think could go a long way for the youth organizations in this country feeling more comfortable on investing in younger players.
Tell us about some of the clubs that you are partnered with your Match IQ, because it's important to know. I mean, if you, I know you've probably heard this before. When we've heard about clubs coming into the States, major clubs, and they'll openly admit it at times, it's really for branding purposes, to get more people in the U.S. know who we are and buy our jerseys and everything else. And sometimes there's a claim how they're going to help develop coaches and players here in the States. And sometimes that results in a 1 or 2 week camp, or it's just in the past it's been a little shaky at times. So tell us more about your group and how maybe you take the next step here.
Sure. So the idea for Match IQ Americas really came about from again, serendipitous phone call. The owner of Match IQ in Europe called me for the Cosmos to see if we would go to the Florida Cup 4 or 5 years ago. 5 years ago, I think it was. And we just started talking about how the sport works globally and what I saw as an opportunity here in the United States, specifically having worked at the Meadowlands, where we've had every major club come through, and then going to San Diego and bringing the U.S. it's the Mexican national team in Venezuela to San Diego, and then my time at Red Bull and Cosmos, and recognizing that, they, as you're saying, they pay lip service to marketing, but don't necessarily do it right, don't recognize that it's a different market. And so the whole idea is about representing clubs that are serious about marketing themselves in the United States, doing it differently than they've done in the past, committing to the understanding that it's a different market, and your players and your coaches are going to have to do interviews, and they're going to have to take the time. You're going to have to support your efforts with social media and social responsibility campaigns, and really recognizing that there are very special, unique opportunities in the United States, but you need an industry expert in the United States, and you need to follow that advice. So we started talking about this 4 years ago, and we just got around to opening the office about a year ago. Schalke is the perfect example of a club that understands that. They spent a few years working with another agency and recognized the uniqueness of what we have in the United States. And we've had a great first year with them, with all the metrics you could look at, the engagement on social media, some of the media stories we've been able to get. And those haven't been easy, because first of all, you got to kind of pitch the story to journalists here in the United States who are used to getting spurned and not getting cooperation out of coaches and executives and players. And then we had to, smooth it over on the other side and kind of walk hand in hand with everybody all the way through the finish line. And we've gotten some great stories out of that. And so Schalke is a great example of understanding that it's a different market and committing to doing things differently here in the United States.
So are these clubs, are they sincerely looking at American players as well? Are they doing, are they scouting?
Yeah, of course. Schalke has Weston McKennie. Weston McKennie is, if you want to look at players as assets, is probably their most valuable asset at the moment. I don't know if they'll sell him now or next year, or if he stays there forever, I don't know. But that is a great success story for them.
Sure.
I'm going to blank on the names because I'm not good at names, but there's another American player came out of North Carolina that is moving into the first team this year. And if he could stay healthy, is the type of talent that they think can get into the starting lineup. Um, so that's a good story. They just signed another 16-year-old out of San Diego to the academy. So they are here. They're paying attention. They have their scouts. Part of what we do is to help widen that net, and I think that's working. And what's
Erik,
great about
what is your theory? Sorry for interrupting, but
that's
I see
okay.
you've got Frankfurt, Hertha Berlin, Wolfsburg. What is your theory as to why Americans, why first of all German clubs are attracted to the American player, and because we've got these high profile Americans who have moved on. The most recently Gio Reyna, who have moved on to German football and are impactful. So there's a trust there or something. Why Germany, do you think? What's your theory?
Well, I think they run their business of soccer clubs better than anybody in the world. The 50+1 rule has kept them from being a serious threat to win Champions League over the last 5 years because they don't have that money that just pours in that's not generated by the club itself. But aside from that, the local support, the way they run their business, the way they run their academies, it's the best run league in the world. And part of their growth and their understanding of the sport is they have to develop their own players and they have to give those kids a chance. So we all remember Pulisic being thrown in at 17, 18 years old in Bundesliga games, 65, 80,000 people. There was no guarantee that he was going to be successful. Schalke, same thing. So we did a deal with Schalke with Haji Wright. Haji Wright came up through their system. He last season, 1920, no, sorry, 1819. He was put in the first team. He was given a chance. He scored a couple goals, I think, but they didn't see him as a guy that was going to stick on the first team. But they put him in meaningful matches and said, you have to perform. And
Right.
they know they have to do that. They have to create their own players. And then ultimately they're going to sell those players. And if you don't have that incentive, like for many years when I was working at Red Bull, our coaches didn't have the incentive to play any young players because that their best bet to get the win on Saturday night was to play what they saw as the best 11. They didn't have a front office, an ownership, a board saying you have to play this 17-year-old kid because we have to see if he's going to succeed. So they do that there, and I think that's the biggest reason. And you have a Weston McKennie that succeeds, and you have a Haji Wright that does okay, but moves on to a different league. I believe he's in Scandinavia now. So that's part of the process, and it's not just American players; it's all players.
What's
Um,
the 50+1 rule that impacts the Bundesliga?
so the club has to be owned basically by the community, 50% plus one vote. Um, so you can't have um, an Abramovich come in and take complete control and just spend whatever he needs to spend to be successful. Um, Red Bull in Leipzig's kind of found a way around that a little bit, and it hasn't met with a lot of positive publicity for Red Bull. But it's worked, and they went from fourth, fifth division to perennial top four, and it's largely because of how they've been able to get around the rules a little bit, but they also have run the team very well. So with that 50+1 rule, you can't have owners like you see around the world that are spending more than they're making to prop up the clubs. And so you've got the perennial Champions League teams are the ones that have more money than everybody else. And even Bayern Munich, who's significantly ahead of 2 through 18 in the Bundesliga, can't compete at that level.
Erik, you said something there, it is in my notes that I wanted to ask you about because I think it's interesting. What are the advantages? So you worked with Red Bull. Uh, I'm broadcasting for a club, New York City, that's a part of a city football group operation. So you have that. That's the setting. You had Red Bull. So you have Salzburg, you have Leipzig, and then Red Bull in Harrison, New Jersey. What are the advantages of having a global owner, and what are the disadvantages from the person on the ground in New Jersey or in New York?
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot to unpack there. Um, the advantage is obviously you have a lot of money. You could afford to make a mistake. Um, you cast a really wide net when it comes to players. So for Leipzig, the Red Bull Academy in New York is bringing talent there. And not only player talent, you see Jesse Marsch is doing well in Salzburg. Maybe he ends up as the manager in Leipzig one of these days. Um, so that's the obvious advantage, money, and that broader network is going to give you more opportunity. I think the disadvantage is very clearly the credibility to the sport. Um, there's not an owner for Red Bull New York in New Jersey, in New York. There's not that chairman that becomes synonymous with a club uh, for Red Bull. It's obviously very corporate. A lot of decisions get made at the corporate level for what's better for the corporation and not for what's good on the ground in New Jersey. So
That's a big one to me. Like,
yeah,
are the people who are that lead those clubs, are the presidents of those clubs, do they have the ultimate power to make decisions?
no,
Sometimes, never. No.
no, they don't. Having sat in that seat, they don't. So what my approach was at Red Bull was to have our staff do the work and run the team like a proper club should be run. And I tried to run interference with the corporation. So some of the battles were to differentiate the club and to be different, to be cutting edge. People in Salzburg wanted turf in the stadium, and I had to fly over and argue with everybody that that was not the right thing to do, that we should have grass. And there are a number of other examples like that. It's so the way I saw my role was to fight for the authenticity of the soccer team in New Jersey, and battle against the corporate um, impulses that maybe a big company would have. And I didn't always win those battles, but I thought that was the important part of the role at the time. And I think we were changing the culture around the team in 2010, 2011. I think it was going in the right direction. And they've obviously taken a very different approach now with it being really run like a feeder team to Salzburg and to Leipzig. And I think that's hurt. And you've got a sporting department, a global sporting department that is focused on Leipzig getting into Champions League. And, that hurts the team in New York.
And one of the things you notice, and I during your time there, New York Red Bull went from bottom in attendance in MLS and to number 4 as of 2011. But attendance has been, well, it has dwindled over the last few years, especially since I've been involved in the league, 2015. So do you have a theory? Is it because Thierry Henry and Tim Cahill are not on the pitch running around, or is it more than that?
I think it's probably a lot of things. The shine wears off a new stadium. That's obviously an issue for everybody. I was proud of 2011 because our attendance went up even further. Our season ticket numbers went even further, even though it was the second year of the stadium.
By the way, I was an original season ticket holder for the Red Bulls, so I'd like to get that credit right now.
Very good. Where were your seats?
We were right behind the supporters section in that second level.
Yeah,
Really good seats. I was
yeah.
fascinated what they did throughout the match. Many of them didn't watch a moment of it, but that was part of their directive to keep the supporters going. I understand,
Yeah.
but it was entertaining. Got 4 seats. Went with my family. Gave the tickets away sometimes. I
Yeah.
loved it. It's a beautiful state. I mean, I've been to all of them. No other stadium compares in terms of sight lines and the level of quality of the pitch. It's really to this day, it's still the best. And that's why when I think that, 10, 11, 12,000 people are in there, I know it's announced as 15, but I know what's in there. It's really it disturbs me. I'm a New Jersey resident. I'm not pleased with the New Jersey soccer community. I don't know why they don't go.
Yeah, well, you said it's a great pitch, and that's my guy Dan Shemish, and he's a Penn State grad.
All right.
Yes, one of the top turf management colleges in the country. Yeah, the idea was to build a facility that was very focused on the average fan to have the best possible sight lines, and I think we definitely accomplished that in an era when suites and club seats were
Sure.
all the rage about how you could maximize your money.
I mean, the number of international events that have been there, U.S. men's national team qualifiers against Costa Rica, that certainly was met with some criticism, but just because of the number of Costa Ricans in the area and
Well,
how many.
I think they got a lot of criticism for that. I don't think it was fair. They deserve criticism for the performance on the field, but you notice
Right.
The Costa Ricans when it was 2-0. And it was a very American crowd, but those 4 or 5,000 Costa Ricans were really loud the last 10 minutes. So that's what people remembered. But people I talked to, players I talked to, said that was not an issue on the field. It was a home game. They just didn't play well.
That's for sure. One final thing, I think if we're chatting with you, Erik, and we're with Erik Stover, who is a former executive with the New York Red Bulls, currently COO of the Cosmos and president of Match IQ Americas. But you've got the guy, Rocco Commisso, passionate, charismatic, enigmatic. I mean, this guy certainly has been somebody at the forefront in his, well, for anybody that puts up $250 million to save a league, that says something. But give us your profile of Rocco Commisso, the man you work for at Cosmos.
Yeah, you said a lot. You said a lot of things. Definitely passionate, hard charging, doesn't want to hear excuses. I think it was a real shame. He was very committed to NASL in trying to save the league. He really wanted to invest that money. I can't imagine any federation in the world that would turn down an investor that wanted to pour $500 million into lower division soccer to help it grow. And his ask wasn't unreasonable. It was a runway to get to full compliance of sanctioning.
Did he was there ever an actual response from the federation to those to that?
I don't know the details because I wasn't on those phone calls, but it was basically no.
Okay.
And it was hung up over what the sanctioning would mean in the short term and why you wouldn't want somebody that would again invest that amount of money into addressing the things that we've talked about that are a problem, and that's the pyramid and having better youth development and a better system for younger players to play. I just don't understand it at all. And the end result was he's taken that money and he's invested in Fiorentina. They're having a decent year. It looks like they may finish top 10 in Serie A. And as he has time to clean out some of the mess that he inherited there with bad contracts, who knows where they'll end up, maybe back in the top 4 again. And that's money that could have gone into soccer in the United States. And it's a shame. But we'll see. We're playing in Nisa and fighting the good fight, and hopefully we'll have a successful fall campaign. And who knows what 2021 will look like.
Well, the the best nickname for a team, I have to say, is the New Jersey Teamsters. So I'm looking forward to the I'm looking forward for the Cosmos versus the Teamsters. That is fantastic. Well, Erik, it's really been a pleasure to meet you and have a chance to review some fascinating things that you've been through in your career. And now all the best with Match IQ, and then certainly with the Cosmos, as the name Cosmos still resonates worldwide. And personally, I went to all those games at Giants Stadium in the 70s and 80s, and so I'm happy that they still exist, and I wish you well with that project as well.
Thanks so much, Glenn. I appreciate it.